Kings. There is a moment when a man loses his reputation. Most men never notice when it happens. No announcement is made. No confrontation takes place. Nobody sends a warning. But something quietly changes. The way people speak to him becomes slightly more casual. The respect in their tone fades. Jokes start coming at his expense. His opinions carry less weight. People interrupt him more easily. And the most dangerous part? He still thinks nothing has changed, because reputation does not collapse loudly. It collapses silently. One weak action. One desperate moment. One emotional decision that exposes who you really are. And suddenly, people realize something about you they can never unsee. They realize you are not the man they thought you were. And once that realization spreads, your reputation is already damaged. Well, history has always understood this truth. Centuries ago, Niccolo Machiavelli wrote something every man should remember. A prince must guard his reputation more carefully than his army, because an army can defend a kingdom. But reputation determines whether the kingdom will even obey you. Today the battlefield is different. It is not fought with swords. It is fought with perception. The way people perceive you determines everything. Who respects you, who ignores you, who trusts you, who tries to manipulate you, and most importantly, who believes they can get away with disrespecting you. If people believe they can disrespect you without consequences, your reputation is already gone, and rebuilding it becomes 10 times harder than building it correctly the first time. This is why powerful men are extremely careful about one thing. They protect their name. Because once your name becomes associated with weakness, desperation, emotional instability, or neediness, people never fully forget it. They may act polite. They may smile. But deep down, your reputation has already been reclassified. You are no longer a man people move carefully around. You are a man people feel comfortable testing. And the moment people start testing you, the power dynamic has already shifted. But here is what most men never realize. Reputation is not destroyed by enemies. It is destroyed by your own behavior. By small actions you believe are harmless. By moments when you choose comfort instead of discipline. By situations where you reveal more emotion than strategy. Let me give you an example. Imagine a man who spends years building an image of composure. He speaks calmly. He does not argue unnecessarily. He appears controlled. People slowly begin to associate him with strength. Not physical strength, psychological strength. The kind that makes people think twice before crossing him. Then one day something happens. Maybe it involves a woman. Maybe it involves money. Maybe it involves pride. Suddenly, this same man begins reacting emotionally. He sends long messages. He argues publicly. He tries to explain himself repeatedly. He raises his voice. He becomes desperate to prove a point. And in that moment, people see something they were never supposed to see. His emotional instability. From that point forward, everything changes. People may still respect him slightly, but the mystery is gone. The illusion of control is broken. And reputation depends heavily on illusion, not fake illusion, but controlled perception. The perception that you are stable, the perception that you are not easily provoked, the perception that you cannot be emotionally manipulated. Once that perception disappears, rebuilding it becomes extremely difficult, because reputation spreads faster than truth. One moment of weakness can travel through 10 conversations before you even realize it happened. Someone mentions it casually. Someone laughs about it privately. Someone repeats the story slightly differently. And suddenly, a narrative forms. Did you hear what he did? That guy lost control. He's not as composed as he pretends. Now imagine how dangerous this becomes in social circles, workplaces, friendships, and relationships. Once people believe you are emotionally predictable, you become controllable. And controllable men are rarely respected. They are managed, handled, manipulated. But men who guard their reputation carefully operate differently. They understand something most people ignore. Every public action becomes part of your reputation. Every reaction people witness. Every argument you engage in. Every time you chase someone's validation. Every time you explain yourself too much. Every time you try to prove your worth, each of these actions sends a signal about how people should treat you. Strong reputations are built through controlled signals. Weak reputations are built through uncontrolled reactions. This is why disciplined men avoid unnecessary exposure. They do not react quickly. They do not overshare. They do not argue publicly. They do not chase validation. Because they understand that reputation is not about convincing people. It is about conditioning people. Conditioning them to associate your presence with a certain standard. A standard of calm. A standard of discipline. A standard of unpredictability. People respect what they cannot easily manipulate. But they manipulate what they fully understand. This is why mysterious men often appear powerful. Not because they are louder, but because people cannot easily predict their behavior. And unpredictability creates caution. Caution creates respect. Respect protects reputation. But once people believe they understand you emotionally, the caution disappears. And when caution disappears, so does respect. This is the invisible game that runs beneath almost every social interaction. A game of perception. A game of reputation. A game that most men are playing without even realizing it exists, which is exactly why so many men destroy their own reputation without knowing when it started. But before we go deeper, I want to ask you something. If you are serious about mastering power, discipline, and psychological strategy, then this channel is built for you. So take 2 seconds right now and subscribe. Because the next few minutes of this video will reveal something most men learn too late. The 5 silent mistakes that slowly destroy a man's reputation without him noticing. Mistakes that make people lose respect for you quietly. Mistakes that make manipulation easier. Mistakes that turn strong men into predictable ones. And once you understand them, you will start seeing them everywhere. In your friends, in your workplace, in your relationships, and maybe even in your own past decisions. Because reputation is not destroyed in one dramatic moment. It is destroyed through patterns. Patterns that slowly change how people classify you. And once people classify you incorrectly, everything you say or do begins passing through that perception, which is exactly how powerful men lose influence without realizing it. The first silent mistake that destroys a man's reputation is something society actually encourages, something people praise, something that is often called being a good man. But in reality, when done without discipline, it quietly signals weakness. The mistake is over-explaining yourself. Most men think explaining themselves earns understanding. They believe that if they just talk enough, justify their actions enough, clarify their intentions enough, people will respect them more. But human psychology does not work that way. The more a man explains himself unnecessarily, the more he communicates something dangerous, that he needs approval. And the moment people sense that you need them to understand you, they realize something important about your psychological position. You are trying to manage their perception, which means their perception controls you. Think about the most respected men you have ever encountered, the men whose presence alone makes people behave more carefully. Notice something about them. They rarely rush to explain themselves. They make a decision. They say what needs to be said, and then they move on. Not because they are arrogant, but because they understand a rule of power that many men ignore. Authority does not argue for acceptance. Authority assumes its position. When a man constantly explains himself, he unknowingly lowers his authority, because explanations invite evaluation, and evaluation invites judgment. Suddenly, people begin asking themselves questions they were never supposed to ask. Why is he trying so hard to prove that? Why does he need us to understand him? Why does this matter so much to him? These small questions slowly chip away at your reputation, not in a dramatic way, but in subtle psychological shifts. The image of calm control begins to fade. The image of emotional investment begins to appear. And emotional investment is where manipulation begins, because people instinctively test the things that seem emotionally important to you. If they know something triggers you, they will eventually press that button. Let's look at a simple situation. A man is accused of something small in a group conversation. Maybe someone jokes about him being cheap, or someone teases him about being too serious. A man with controlled reputation responds calmly. Maybe he says one short sentence. Maybe he ignores it entirely. Either way, the moment passes quickly. But a man who over-explains does something very different. He begins defending himself. No, that's not true. You don't understand what actually happened. Let me explain the situation. Then he goes into details. He describes the event. He clarifies his intentions. He tries to fix how people see him. But in doing so, he accidentally confirms something he never intended to reveal: that their opinion matters deeply to him. And once people realize that their opinion has emotional weight over you, your reputation becomes easier to influence. This is why controlled men treat accusations, jokes, and misunderstandings very carefully. They understand something critical. Not every perception needs to be corrected. Sometimes correcting it actually damages you more, because the act of correction reveals emotional attachment. And emotional attachment is the easiest handle people can grab when they want leverage over you. This is one of the reasons Niccolò Machiavelli constantly emphasized perception over explanation. He understood that leaders who constantly defended their image looked insecure, while leaders who maintained composure appeared stronger, even when rumors existed. Think about it carefully. Which image feels more powerful? A man arguing with 10 people about why they misunderstood him, or a man who simply continues moving forward unaffected? The second image communicates something far more dangerous: that you are not easily shaken, and that perception protects your reputation. Now, this does not mean you should never clarify anything. Strategic clarification exists, but strategic clarification is rare, controlled, and intentional. Over-explaining is emotional. Strategic clarification is calculated, and reputation thrives on calculation. Here is another example that destroys reputations every day. A man sends multiple messages after someone ignores him. First message, then another, explaining why he sent the first message. Then another, apologizing for sending too many messages. What does this communicate? Not confidence, not stability. It communicates anxiety. It communicates that attention from that person has become emotionally important. And reputation weakens whenever people sense emotional dependency, because dependency shifts power. It tells people that their presence has value over your emotional state. And once someone realizes they have that power, they rarely give it up. This is why disciplined men respect silence. Silence protects reputation. Silence prevents unnecessary signals. Silence creates space for perception to remain controlled. Over-explaining fills that silence with emotional noise. Noise that reveals too much. Noise that people analyze. Noise that weakens the image you have carefully built. But here is the dangerous twist. Most men over-explain because they believe they are being responsible. They believe they are being transparent. They believe they are being respectful. In reality, they are slowly training people to see them as emotionally available for manipulation. And once that training begins, reversing it becomes difficult. Because people remember patterns. They remember how easily you reacted before. So when you suddenly try to become calm and controlled, they test you again, just to see if the old reaction still exists. This is why reputation must be guarded from the beginning, not repaired after damage. A strong reputation is built through consistency. Consistency of behavior. Consistency of emotional control. Consistency of boundaries. Once people become accustomed to that consistency, something powerful happens. They begin adjusting their behavior around you. They stop testing certain lines. They stop pushing certain buttons because they associate your presence with stability. But if your behavior is inconsistent, if sometimes you appear calm and other times you appear desperate, people become curious. And curiosity leads to testing. Testing leads to exposure. Exposure leads to reputation damage, which brings us to the second silent mistake that destroys reputation even faster than over-explaining. A mistake that many men commit because they believe it makes them appear loyal, supportive, or caring. But in reality, it quietly tells people something very dangerous about how much disrespect you are willing to tolerate. And once people discover that limit, they will push it. Over, and over, and over again. The second silent mistake that destroys a man's reputation is far more dangerous than most people realize, because it does not look like weakness at first. In fact, many men believe it makes them appear patient, mature, and emotionally intelligent. But in reality, it quietly signals something else. Something people immediately recognize. The mistake is tolerating repeated disrespect without consequence. Not one mistake, not one misunderstanding, but patterns. Patterns of behavior where someone crosses a line and nothing happens. Then they cross it again, and again, and again. Every time this happens, something subtle but powerful is taking place inside the minds of the people watching. They are updating their mental file about you. And that update changes your reputation. Because reputation is not built on what you say you tolerate. It is built on what people see you tolerate. If people repeatedly witness you accepting behavior that undermines you, they begin to assume something about your boundaries, that your limits are flexible, and flexible limits are invitations. Invitations for more testing, more pushing, more subtle forms of disrespect. This is how reputation slowly erodes, not through dramatic confrontations, but through quiet tolerance. Imagine a man in a social group. At first, everyone treats him with a basic level of respect. But then one person begins making small jokes at his expense. The first time, everyone laughs. The man laughs too. He assumes it is harmless. Then it happens again the next week. Another joke, another small comment, another subtle jab. Again, he laughs it off. Now something interesting happens. The rest of the group observes this pattern. They see that nothing happens when the line is crossed. No correction, no boundary, no shift in tone. So slowly, another person joins the behavior. Then another. Then another. Within months, the group dynamic has changed completely. The same man who once received neutral respect has now become the default target. Not because everyone hates him, but because he unintentionally trained them to believe it was acceptable. This is the brutal truth about reputation. People treat you according to the boundaries you enforce, not the boundaries you wish they understood. And powerful men understand something critical about this dynamic. Boundaries are not established through speeches. They are established through behavioral correction. Correction does not mean aggression. Correction does not mean emotional reactions. Correction simply means the pattern stops, immediately, decisively, without drama, because drama signals emotional involvement, but calm correction signals authority. Think about the men in history who maintained powerful reputations. Leaders, commanders, strategists. They did not tolerate repeated violations of their authority, not because they were insecure, but because they understood what repeated violations communicate to everyone watching. Weak enforcement. And weak enforcement invites chaos. This principle existed long before modern society. Even in the era of Niccolò Machiavelli, rulers understood that authority collapses when disrespect is allowed to spread unchecked. A single act of defiance could inspire others. One ignored insult could become a signal that the leader was not as powerful as people believed, which is why controlled leaders corrected problems early, before they turned into patterns. But modern men often misunderstand this completely. They believe tolerance always equals maturity. They believe ignoring disrespect always equals emotional intelligence. And sometimes it does, but only when the behavior does not repeat. If disrespect repeats, ignoring it becomes something else. It becomes permission. And permission reshapes reputation faster than almost anything else. Here is where the situation becomes even more dangerous. Because once people become comfortable disrespecting you, they do not stop. Human psychology rarely moves backward. If someone successfully pushes a boundary today, they will try pushing it further tomorrow. Not always consciously, but instinctively. Because boundaries define hierarchy, and hierarchy determines how people behave. If someone believes you occupy a lower psychological position, their behavior will reflect it. They will interrupt you more. They will dismiss your opinions faster. They will challenge you more openly, not necessarily because they dislike you, but because your reputation now allows it. And once this dynamic spreads across a social environment, reversing it becomes extremely difficult. Because people remember the old pattern. They remember how easily they got away with it before. So when you suddenly begin enforcing boundaries, they feel confused, sometimes even offended. They may say things like, "You've changed. You're taking things too seriously. You used to be cool about this." But what they really mean is something else. They mean, "You used to let us treat you differently." This is why disciplined men correct patterns early, not emotionally, not dramatically, but clearly. A simple change in tone, a direct response, a shift in behavior, enough to communicate one important message. That pattern will not continue. Once people receive that signal consistently, something interesting happens. They adjust, because humans naturally adapt to the environment around them. If disrespect creates friction, people reduce it. If disrespect creates no consequence, people increase it. And reputation is simply the long-term result of those adjustments. The environment you allow becomes the reputation you carry. But there is another mistake that destroys reputation even faster than tolerating disrespect. A mistake that exposes weakness instantly. A mistake that reveals emotional dependence so clearly that people begin seeing you differently almost overnight. It happens in friendships. It happens in workplaces. But most commonly, it happens in relationships. Because this mistake shows people something they can never unsee. It shows them exactly how much control they have over your emotional state. And once someone realizes they have that level of influence over you, your reputation stops protecting you. Instead, it begins working against you. But there is another mistake that destroys reputation even faster than tolerating disrespect. A mistake that exposes weakness instantly. A mistake that reveals emotional dependence so clearly that people begin seeing you differently almost overnight. It happens in friendships. It happens in workplaces. But most commonly, it happens in relationships. Because this mistake shows people something they can never unsee. It shows them exactly how much control they have over your emotional state. And once someone realizes they have that level of influence over you, your reputation stops protecting you. Instead, it begins working against you. In Part 2, we will break down the next 2 silent mistakes that destroy a man's reputation faster than almost anything else. And trust me, one of them is a behavior millions of men repeat every day without realizing how much damage it causes. Part 2 will be released in the next 48 hours. So if you want to understand how powerful men protect their name, their influence, and their reputation, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. Because once you understand these final principles, you will never look at reputation the same way again.